All right, so welcome. So Kasia's got her first couple starting this Thursday booked. I'm not 100% sure that you will end up seeing them just because they owe a lot of money. So start with that. I just found out from their previous counselor that he thought that they were paying, and they did pay for the first 5 sessions, but something happened at some point. They switched to individual sessions at some point, and I think he saw one of them for a few sessions, the other for a couple of sessions, and then back together. And at some point, I guess, along the way, the payment situation fell apart. So I did leave her a voicemail, just letting her know. I wasn't sure whether he just forgot to cancel certain sessions or whatever it was, but it sounds like all those sessions took place from speaking with him. So I've let her know, and if I don't hear back probably by Wednesday, I'll probably just end up canceling the session.
Yeah.
But in either event, hopefully she gets back. And even if she doesn't pay up completely, if she just has a plan in place, I think right now they're set to pay $20 per session. So even if they end up paying, $30 per session, and that can all go towards the older sessions, then that would be fine. So
going forward, right? So they have already like a reduced cost from.
They already have a reduced cost, and they've only paid 5 out of the 18 sessions that they've had.
Okay.
Yeah. So I just want to hold them accountable. I don't need to know the reason they couldn't pay or whatever it was, but as long as we have a plan in place. So maybe we'll start with there around like e-transfers. It was like a lapse from the previous counselor that saw them, but at the same time, I understand it, right? Like they paid for 5 sessions, there were no issues, and then at whatever point they just stopped. So it's like they knew they had the correct instructions, and was just assuming that they were paying each time. So I'll find out when they respond what happened, and I'll let you know about that.
Thank you.
Yeah. So assuming you do see them, and either way, we're assuming that this is like before you see a couple at all, sort of a very like early exposure to couples work. So any kind of questions just kind of come up to you right off the bat?
I guess, especially in this case where they've already attended 15 sessions and they have a history with a different counselor and the rapport and all that, and they might be in the middle of something already. They've started some sort of work. And I'm assuming also that counselor also did the emotion focused therapy with them.
Not emotion focused. So I just want to have a distinction. So there's emotion focused, which is Les Greenberg, and then there's emotionally focused, which is Sue Johnson. So they broke apart in the 90s, and so they both wanted to keep the EFT acronym. And so he kept the emotion focused name, and then she took emotionally focused. So just keep that in mind. The modalities did diverge a little bit. And he mostly focuses on individual work, although he does do couples work as well. And Sue Johnson is mostly couples and family work, but of course, there's an emotionally focused for individuals as well. But that's the primary focus. Yeah.
That's really
so to your question, yeah, there's a rapport build. I did have some feedback. Maybe I'll share it with you later about what their experience was like. So the female partner wasn't too happy with how things went. And it sounds to me like she's very bright, like very intelligent, and but I don't want this part recorded, so I won't say too much about it. But ultimately, she didn't find that it was a good fit. That being said, they did see the previous counselor for 18 sessions, so there was some benefit, I'm guessing, or else they wouldn't have continued to attend. But yeah, she had some issues, and that she brought up to me, and I took notes around. But yeah, I generally don't like to have clinicians come in with any particular bias of any kind. So sometimes it's better to go in with a blank slate, and then once you do see them, then we can introduce that colorful, feedback, so that you can compare that to your own experience.
Absolutely, yeah.
But it's not uncommon for someone that sees couples to see someone that saw them previously. Generally speaking, it means that it wasn't a good fit, or they didn't obviously get everything that they wanted out of the experience. That being said, in this more artificial environment where people have to stop, oops, sorry, sometimes my camera does that. Sometimes when people have to artificially stop because they were seeing a student, it may have been a really good fit, and then they really wanted to continue the work, but they weren't able to afford it. And so it's not because of a choice, right? And it is what it is. It's unfortunate to that extent. But in this case, it's very similar to like if you were in private practice, you were seeing a couple comes in and they had seen someone, and you would actually, a good place to start is, what was that experience like for you? Were there things that worked for you? Were there things that didn't work for you? Just so that you can take that into account when you're starting to work with this couple. A lot of times with couples work as opposed to individual work, the modality does come into play. Whereas with individual work, a lot of clients come in, they have no idea what modality the practitioner employed during their experience. But with couples counseling, part of the process is to have them understand the modality, because that assists with whether they're doing like work or learning outside of the sessions, and the homework or the things they do in between sessions require them to understand the modality. And it's an interpersonal, all couples models are interpersonal models to some extent. So it is important to understand what it is that we're doing here in the couples work. Yeah. But other than that, I wouldn't treat it any different than if it was someone that had never done couples work before.
Okay, so this is super helpful, Ofir, thank you. So I'm thinking now, like during the course of my program, I don't know how about the rest of the group, but I haven't really done much practice around emotionally focused, or either of them actually. So I would really, I still am planning to do my own research, but it will be great to hear from you how you work with this approach, specifically in the couples context.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any exposure to couples work? Just like zoom out a little bit. And does anyone else have any experience with couples work at all? So I understand where everyone's at here.
Yeah, we had a course that was primarily focused on family and couple therapy. Mm-hmm. And there, I, for example, like found a lot of like I went with solution focused for my assignment. So I digged a little bit deeper with that approach, but we were discussing also these approaches. And yeah, it's just like the general theory behind couples therapy. I understand it, but I'm not really familiar with maybe the process for this one.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so if we just zoom out and look at something like a solution-focused approach, or maybe if I group it into like a more of the cognitive approaches, that's like a kind of maybe a good, or sometimes I call it like a left brain approach, right? Versus a right brain approach. So everything in the left brain side of things often look at either skills-based skills, right? Skills-based tools, essentially, that you're going through. In the middle, or as the name sort of implies, we're looking at the content and the surface issue. We're trying to find solutions for them, right? And I don't want to be, I'm obviously biased. My bias is EFT, of course, but it often, when people come to me and they start from a modality like that, it ends up having the counselor be the mediator in a sense, right? Or the translator, so to speak, for both parties. So the couples tend to have a dependency of sorts, right? For this particular issue, you're going to help us through it. And it all couples counseling modalities related to relative to individual. It is a very short-term modality, right? Even EFT is in the research is 8 to 12 sessions, so it's still considered quite short-term relative to individual work. In the middle, we have kind of more systems-based modalities, right? Like Satir, Bowen family systems, like a lot of these systems-based approaches, they kind of take a little bit, and Gottman might fall in there as well. They do the skills-based, but they also try to incorporate some of the experiential as well. The experiential being trying to understand and to bring to the surface the individual's experience of what is happening outside of the, no, sorry, not outside, but in relation to the system, in relation to the interaction or the way in which the two of them impact each other. Going underneath it for both of them is sort of the experiential side, and that's really where EFT heavily focuses on. A small part of it is on the systems, because we still need to understand what is happening between the two of you. What does it look like from a video camera standpoint, for example? What would it see? Like, how is there, you know, an input and an output, so to speak? One person's behavior, you know, lands on another person. It goes through them in a certain way. That's more the experiential that we uncover, but then it comes out the other side, and it comes back to the individual in another behavior that then we look at, and it's like, how do we impact each other, right? And that's what a lot of the systems pieces do, right? So with EFT in particular, with the experiential aspect, the crux of the model is to understand both of their underlying experience and to bring it to the surface so that it's felt in the room. That's really the key, right? So you tell me about your fight from earlier in the week, but I need to see in real time, in the moment, how that actually impacts you, right? So that part of the model is, in order for, or part of the tenet of the model, like why it works, is you need to feel what it is that you're sharing in order, like the amygdala essentially needs to be activated in order for us to shift what is that's happening in the moment between you. So sometimes EFT,
sorry,
what's that?
It's like enactment, asking them to
Yeah,
present the scene.
That's not the scene per se, but present what's happening for them. Like the actual experience. What we enact in EFT, and we call them enactments in EFT, is as the name pertains, emotionally focused therapy. Anytime we hit a new emotional experience, how do we know it's new? Generally, we follow what is hard to share, right? And what is within the window of tolerance, but at the end of their window of tolerance, right? It's like, we don't want to be too much in the comfort, and we don't want to be too outside of it. So it needs to be something that's within it, so that it still comes off as vulnerable, but not so outside that it comes across as acting, or that where they're shut down or disconnected from what it is that they're experiencing. So anytime we hit a new emotional experience, how do we know that? We can see it non-verbally a lot of the times. We can see it's contrasted. So we have the word in EFT called primary experience, which contrasts from secondary. And secondary is what we consider those behaviors and the coping. That's a form of indirect communication. So secondary is what we see in that systems part of it. That's sort of maladaptive, or maladaptive to this relationship at least. It might be very adaptive growing up and other parts of life, like someone might be very assertive, and that might be really good in their business career, but in their relationship, when they're really assertive to their partner, that might come across as like very aggressive, and it might trigger them to the extent that they shut down, or their partner withdraws or dissociates, or defends themselves, right? So it's not adaptive in their current relationship. And so we name that, we acknowledge that that's what happens, and that creates these cycles. So in EFT, we use the term cycle to indicate the system. And there may be multiple cycles, but we generally try to pick apart one primary cycle. But relationships can have multiple cycles. Generally, they have one primary cycle, and then that cycle over time tends to get bigger and bigger and bigger and has impacts. And so there's in the moment impacts, the costs, the emotional sort of load, then there's costs over time as well that we look at. And that's more of like the timeline of the relationship and how things shift over time, that those are more complex, but we also track that as well. So overall, you've got the systems. We try to understand what it looks like. We draw the figure 8 as a representation sometimes of what you see as this is behavior going one direction from one partner to the other. Then it goes underneath. This underneath part is, if you imagine like an ocean, right? Anything above the ocean is the behaviors, the perceptions, the interpretations, and then anything right kind of below what we call like the dotted line, right in the middle. This is like getting into the experience, but right up, like right on the dotted line, it might be things like behaviors, so like actions, tones, things like that. That you know, underneath it, there's experience there, but it's ambiguous. At least it can be misinterpreted. And then under the dotted line is the underlying experience, the parts that are not comfortable for them to show, and there's fears around showing it, and there might even not be awareness around what's there, right? Because that ties into you know, childhood interpretations as well, right? So like the underlying attachment meanings might be there that they grew up with, right? Like these long-term like worldview schemas that people pull from earlier relationships, right? They're kind of underneath it that are also maybe distorting, or we project onto our partner's behavior. And all that sort of gets uncovered. And those are the things we end up enacting. So a lot of things can get enacted, but we don't do it from a top-down view. So if I back up again, EFT is considered a non-pathologizing modality. We're not trying to label anyone's behavior as good or bad. We're trying to be curious, and we're trying to understand. We're trying to help our couples understand what is happening. Not to say this is good or bad, right? Not even to say that this does this thing to your partner. That's not, like, even that is not really our place to say, because what we're really trying to do is have people take risks, emotional risks, right? And when they take these risks, we try to help them shape it in a way that's vulnerable, and also to help the receiving partner receive it in such a way that is it's what it was meant to express, as opposed to what sometimes they end up hearing from it, right? So a big part of it is bringing these underlying experiences into the surface. Once we hit a particular raw emotional sort of place, we get them to turn to their partner and share that experience, and we gauge, can they do it, right? Is this too much for them? Like, where is this on their window of tolerance? And we bring it back so that what they end up actually enacting or sharing is within the experience, or within the window of tolerance. So that might mean that we get them to a place with their partner there in the room where they're really vulnerable. They're looking at us. We're, you know, doing whatever modality. You know, generally EFT brings up a lot of person-centered modality, where we're really active listening. We're slowing things down. We're reflecting. We're inviting them to go into their underlying experience. We're using our own voice to make it safe for them to do so, right? There's a lot of different interventions within EFT, but ultimately it's like, there's a lot of things, but you might have a few go-tos that you notice really work for you and your clients, but there's a good list of about 12 different interventions that ultimately is what you would do in individual counseling, but now you're doing it, you've got your one sort of dyad in the partner that you're focused on at a time, while the other partner is either listening or maybe getting triggered by what's going on, and you're going to have to manage that a little bit and ensure that they're there with you as well. But ultimately there, it's a sequence of going down in that infinity loop, or a good analogy is the ocean, like I said, or an elevator, right, where you're going down levels. emotional levels. And as you notice that there's, especially early on in the first couple of sessions, you kind of assume in a way that anything they're sharing now is new emotional information that their partner hasn't yet been exposed to. So that allows you to start really light. It could be as light as them not even sharing and you sharing for them. That's like we call a proxy enactment, to them sharing their own coping, because that might be sort of taking accountability. This is what my body wants to do. This is what I want to react. I want to get angry at you, but that's very different than actually getting angry. So it could be anything like that to start with, which can be conducive to kind of bringing down the armor, so to speak, of the other partner. But as time goes on, we get more and more vulnerable. But when we do hit emotional information, and then we get them to consider what would it be like for them to share that with their partner, meaning, can you look at your partner, you know, now that you've got the sadness, for example, let's say you hit some sadness, right? Can you turn to your partner? What would that be like for you to share that with your partner, right? Just to consider it, just to look them in the eyes. And that might be really hard, right? So their response might be, yeah, I don't think I can do that. Even though they just shared it with you and their partners in the room, it's very different to do it cognitively or to do it with you and then to consider doing it with your partner. We call that a right brain to right brain connection. So that their partner being the attachment figure, and EFT, it's like its biggest tenet is attachment. All the research, all the modality was created from attachment theory, but taken from a child-adult attachment to an adult-adult romantic attachment. And so when you look at your partner and you have this emotion, this primary emotion in you, everything might get shut down the moment you look at them, because now all the memories of any other attempts that you've tried to share something like this with them that didn't go well, that now comes to the surface. That might be a resistance focus for you to actually do that. And so there's some resistance. So it's up to us to acknowledge, like, oh, that would be really hard, right? So some fear is coming up right now, right? So what is it that's coming up for you as far as what you're afraid of? Like, what do you expect? What do you anticipate? What do you fear that they would respond with? And so if they come up with something specific, like I'm afraid they'll laugh at me or something like that, or I'm afraid that they'll turn away. Okay, so that's your fear right now. What would it be like to share that with them, right? Just to share what you're afraid of them doing. So that's still an enactment, but it's called slicing it thin. You're slicing down the experience, the risk. You're slicing it down so that they're still enacting something, but that's more manageable, that is within their window of tolerance, which allows it actually to become off more vulnerable. Like if you had asked them to share something that's vulnerable, that's outside of their comfort zone, that they were able to look at you and share, but then you ask them to do the same thing, it might actually come out very different, right? Because now they're having to protect themselves. Maybe it comes with some you statements. Maybe it comes with a I'm sad, but you, and then it's not as vulnerable as it needs to be in order to be a good primary expression. So that's a lot there that I said. So yeah, maybe I'll let that sit with everyone. And does anyone have questions around what we talked about so far? I don't want to go too in the weeds right now, just because in the first session, you're generally, the way we have it broken up, and as you'll see, the way I booked it and how we book most of our first sessions is we do like a third split. So for the first third, which works out because it's 80 minutes to 25 minutes, you meet with one of them. Then the next 25 minutes, you meet with the other. And then the last 30 minutes, you meet together, right? And that's a good general way to build that individual attachment with both of them individually, right? To get comfortable with both of them and on that one-on-one sort of manner. It also allows you to weed out some what we call contraindicators. So if there's any abuse going on, if there's any severe mental illness, if there's any kind of active affairs, these are some things, or active drug use. These are some things that are helpful to know one-on-one before having to, be confronted with that with both of them there in the room. Secrets as well. From their point of view, it's nice to have that one-on-one session, because maybe they're more comfortable not sharing something in front of their partner, right? And so they want to share it with you first, right? And so we still maintain that confidentiality in that 25 minutes. I generally, I'm not the only one, but I mean, it's not everyone does this, so I'll bring that caveat first. Once I meet with them together, I almost always do not break them apart. It's like it's a triad now. It's the attachment now is between me and their relationship, and adding another element. Not to say I've never done it, I've definitely have, but that's why it's almost always or almost never. The extra element creates a lot of challenges and a lot of variables when you do, as Byron, the last therapist that saw them, now is learning why it's not a good idea to do that. I was not his supervisor, but if I was, I would have definitely discouraged him from doing that, because it creates an imbalance, regardless of your intention. It tends to do that. I can talk more about that another time, but yeah, I want to make this sort of last half an hour be as useful as possible, for you especially, Kasia. So yeah, let me know where you want to take it.
That's interesting what you said about, I find it very helpful. So thank you so much for everything you've said. It makes total sense to me to first meet them briefly one-on-one and just kind of establish a little bit of this professional intimacy with them, if that makes sense. You mentioned secrets, and here's my question, because if this is just for this one time we meet them one-on-one and they share something with us that is tremendous for their, like, it affects their relationship significantly, how would that, I mean, I can imagine that it would be really difficult for us as their counselors manage that secret going forward with them if we just focus then on building that rapport between us and their relationship and not them individually. So how would you manage?
So it's always going to be, this is a gray area, of course, it's always going to be, it depends on. So I know Gottman's approach for the most part is no secrets. And there are some EFT practitioners that employ that. But in my experience, I actually endorse when I have both of them there, and I break them up. I do the consent form together usually, and then I break them up. I do stress that individual session's for them. So the confidentiality does survive that session. So even though we're coming into couples work, one of the things, if you look at our questionnaire, like that I go through, it's on the drive, and I made a video about it that I can share afterwards, where I go through all the questions in that questionnaire. So if the answer to one of those questions, which is there anything that we went through today that you're not comfortable with it coming up in the couples sessions, and what that means is that I won't bring it up, not that they're free, of course, to bring it up, and then of course it's not a secret anymore. But if there's anything that you did share today that you're not comfortable, this is the space to talk about it. Right? So it really does depend on what it is, right? Of course, we want at a certain point full transparency. In the first session, sorry, my phone's also connected, or this headset's connected to that, and I was just getting a call, so I just disconnected it. Of course, we want full transparency, right? But before even full transparency, we want the relationship. Right? One of the purposes of that individual session, one, not all, is to be able to express to them that the most important thing is my focus is on the interpersonal between the two of them. That's the client, right? Now, based on that, eventually at some point, whatever the secret is, it's going to be important that it comes out. Ideally not from me, ideally from you, from the person that has the secret. So we can talk about, because we're meeting one-on-one, we can talk about what that is, right? I can't say more than that because I don't know specifically what it is because it's hypothetical, but I've never had an issue where we weren't able to eventually talk about it. But what's nice about putting the relationship before the secret is that once we're working through a lot of the things that we do in couples counseling, especially EFT, they end up telling their partner whatever the thing is, whether they do it at home or we do it in the session. Maybe they'll message me ahead of time. I really want to bring this up today. Today's going to be the day. And then I support them around how to bring it up, right?
Okay.
People don't want secrets, right? Secret is another way to cope, right? So all these things. So the reason the model is the modality, and I say it's non-pathologizing, is everything has a rationale from the perspective of their attachment, right? So anything, right? Anything you can think of, and that includes affairs, that includes drug use, it includes anything you can think of. Is its own relationship. Even you can think of like overthinking as a coping, and it's if I'm overthinking and I'm, let's say, my coping is to disconnect from the relationship for the moment, and I'm, anxious and overthinking, that's a coping, right? So secrets and things like that also fall in there, right? Everything you can think of becomes a secondary, an indirect way to communicate to your partner. Verbal, nonverbal behaviors, addictions, these all end up coming out anyways in the session. So one of the contraindicators, though, so active affairs is one of these things where in the research, it's one of the things that bring down the efficacy, of course, right? As you can imagine, I'm not willing to give up my mistress is not very conducive to a relationship where both partners agree to be monogamous, right?
Yeah. No, I see definitely, I see value in like receiving that information in one-on-one, and then just showing it can show the progress as well to us, which is really good.
Before we go really deep into that particular topic, let me say 99% of couples, their answer to that question is I have no secrets. Right? At the point at which they're coming to couples counseling, all those secrets are generally already out.
Yeah.
So whether they're coming in proactively or they're coming in because of a crisis, the secret's out of the bag, so to speak. In the 1%, even like the thing that the secrets generally are, it's more around, I'm not comfortable with my partner knowing this because I'm afraid of how they're going to react. It's not because they want to maintain a secret, right? And it almost always comes out in the session anyways. It's like 1% of the 1% are actually secrets that you're probably thinking about.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. Thank you. And so in one-on-one, of course, we go through informed consent with them individually, and that's between me and that given person. And then
not necessarily. Most of the time I go through it with both of them in the room together, then we split up.
Oh, okay.
So I don't have to go through it twice. It's more for convenience, but I express to them in that moment that what you do share in the individual session is also confidential, unless you don't want that to be confidential.
So they will jump on the call together, and then we will split. One of them will leave the call,
that's up to them. Like in your case, because it's remote. So that's up to them, and they've been through this before, right? So they know. So if they come in individually, then you do that. If they give you a choice, then you can tell them, it'd be good to just go through the consent form for a few minutes together. It'll save us some time.
Okay, perfect.
But maybe only one of them shows up first, so that's okay too.
Okay. And I'm thinking now, when you finally get them together for the first time, do you usually set some sort of rules for how you communicate during the session, or is it necessary to set any rules? Or
what kind of rules are you thinking about, like ground rules around yelling and things like that?
Yeah, I guess no, we want the emotions to come forward, but for example, I don't know, maybe not rules, because that would be that would make it very rigid and not welcoming.
Yeah, maybe think of an example. What are you thinking about specifically right now?
I'm thinking more that if one person is talking, the other person listens patiently. And of course, we can't expect that from somebody if they are not, if that's not their natural reaction, it will still come out. But is it something we address, not as a rule, but rather as just, to kind of set the expectations of how we communicate in the room or what we strive for in the room?
Yeah, so the clear answer is no. And the reason is because like you said, most of the time it's not conscious, anything that they're doing. So setting a rule and then having to enforce the rule, that's a challenge, because you're kind of outing someone that you're the one doing the wrong thing. You're breaking the rule. And then when the focus is on that, as opposed to what you're there to work on, it creates the perception, at least, that you're taking sides. And that's the one thing that we really want to focus on EFT, is that there are no sides. The sides, I'm on the side of your relationship. So if anyone is not thinking that I'm on their side or on the relationship side, then I'm not doing my job or I'm not listening right. Because it's in EFT, it's either win, win, win or lose, lose, lose. There's no in between. It's the one black and white thing that there is.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. Okay.
Yeah. And yeah, I supervised someone recently, one of our students that's still with us now. She's seeing couples, but she has a different supervisor. And that supervisor doesn't do couples work. And I think she saw the couple for 5 or 6 sessions, and she spent the last 3 sessions creating rules and enforcing rules. And if she would have come to me earlier, I would have told her why that's not a good idea, and she's experiencing exactly why it's not a good idea. Because then the what you end up spending your sessions is managing the behavior, and that's not really helpful, I think, for couples counseling.
Makes total sense.
Yeah, and
talk about it,
yeah, and here's another sort of analogy in a sense. When they're calm, their idea of what rules are going to be very different than when they're triggered. So even if they agree to something from a calm place, and even if, which is a big if and probably impossible, you come up with a perfect language, it's still arbitrary because words are imperfect. And in that moment, they're going to argue those rules. So there's I'll send it to you after, but yeah, a good one to watch would be when I went over the form. I think I also have that session with that student that I just talked about around the rules. So I'll send you that as well.
You mentioned, do you have any other materials that you could share with us? I mean, for sure,
I probably have about 1,000 hours of video. So just let me know where you want to start, and I'll send it to you.
I don't know.
So the answer is yes. Yeah, so it's very easy to overwhelm you with this stuff, right? So of course I would say read anything by Sue. The EFT manual, of course, is the best. It's very dense, so you might want to start with one of her more recent work where it's simpler, because it's not super in the weeds. So Attachment Theory and Practice is really good and came out in 2019. As far as recommendations to give to your clients, a really good one is, and for you as well, is Hold Me Tight. She wrote that one for couples going through EFT, and also just anyone interested in a layman's, very experiential version of EFT. There's Hold Me Tight workshops people run all the time, like weekends and things like that are really good. Sometimes I recommend it to my clients. Yeah.
Nice.
But those are very much exercise-based, skill-based, right? It's more top-down. So EFT is extremely bottom-up, meaning what emerges in the session is what we work on. Whereas a skills-based, like a Hold Me Tight sort of workshop, you're learning about aspects of a relationship, and then you're trying to, through questions, elicit these things. Whereas in the sessions, we're talking about, tell me about what happened this week, right? What's coming up in the room right now? It's a very different approach. maybe for now, think of like what you're most worried or curious about for your first session, and then we can really kind of pinpoint exactly kind of where to start as far as answering you. I think you asked already, in that 30 minutes where you're there together, think of it as a very light EFT session, right? EFT sessions are generally either going to be a 50-minute or an 80-minute. I would recommend the 80. If clients ask you how long, definitely recommend the 80, because the pacing is much better, especially when you're starting out. To get to that experiential place, it can take 45 minutes. So what are you going to do with the last 5 minutes if you just got there, right? So that's one reason. And even if you're not starting out, if you have a client that's either there's trauma on either side, or, and I say either side because if one is not overly traumatized, but the other one is, anything they're saying as you're trying to get them to their primary state, that's going to be triggering their partner. You're going to have to continually intervene and, you know, reassure and soothe this partner while you're working with this partner, and that slows down the process. An easy sort of bread and butter sort of couple, once you get a few sessions under your belt, it might only take 10 minutes because their emotions, their primary emotions are already on their sleeve and they're ready to go. They kind of already understand the process.
Yeah.
But yeah, 80 minutes is generally a much better pace where you can not expect, but you have a much higher chance of doing an enactment on both sides. An ideal session, a 50-minute session, you're doing at least one enactment from the expressor to the receiver, and then the receiver then enacts back what it was like for them, and then being able to process what just happened, at least one of those. One generally when you're starting out, and then in an 80-minute session, around one cycle, you're getting to do that on both sides.
Yeah.
Right? Pursuer gets to enact. You get to go, what was that like for them? What was it like for you to hear? Can you share that with your partner? What was that like to receive? Here's what I noticed you doing. Here's how it fits into your cycle. Now let's go to you, right? And then we get the same, it might be the same interaction, right? The same fight on the couch. This is what happened for you in that moment. It's kind of nice to be able to use the same scenario. Doesn't mean you always do it, but it's nice to be able to go on the other side of the same coin. And then now, ooh, this is what you experienced from the same exact moment in time. And
That's
that gives
really
you
helpful.
5 minutes to like tie the bow, as we like to say.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Which is the structure of, how we go through.
Yeah. And I mean, don't think of it as like you're not doing a good job if you don't get that, but it's like just something to strive towards.
Yes, absolutely. And do you have any like and again, probably I can Google some of that, but I haven't checked it yet. But if you have it at hand, like a list of the best or like interventions that you would recommend for EFT?
Risk. It's called risk. RISSSC. Look up that acronym and look up REV, REV. Those are the two combinations of intervention. REV is how to do it, and risk is the names.
Awesome. Thank you.
It's RISSSC. I probably know it. Like reflection, imagery, slow. C is concise. Yeah, I'm not good at tests, but I do them. I just the names sometimes don't go along with the. Oh yeah, S. So slow, simple. One of the S's is simple. Like emotions are simple, right? So yeah, I'm only missing one S. It'll come to me.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
And you would use your other skills from other modalities, right? You know, everything you can think of, like person-centered, like active listening. You know, a big one that I learned over the years that's huge is bringing your own feelings into it, right? So when someone has a lot of resistance to dropping down, well, that's what we call dropping down, is into their feelings. For example, so let's say the male, a female partner, let's say, points her finger and says, "You're an idiot." And I'm working with the male, and he goes, "Yeah, no, it doesn't bother me." And I tried all the other ones, and I go, "Okay, so your partner of 8 years calls you an idiot. This partner that you say you really love calls you an idiot and has no impact on you." And he goes, "Yeah, no." So then I might go, if that was my partner and I was called that, I would feel really hurt. So there's bringing yourself into it.
Opening that door for them.
And
Yeah.
especially males in our society, just giving them the permission that it's okay to feel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a great one. Yeah.
But most important is tracking. For me, tracking and reflecting very clearly what it is that I'm hearing is going to be the thing that gives their nervous system the sense that this person's really here with me. And more than anything, I think that individual or couples counseling, right? But remember, they're partners in the room. And so if there's any stress around that, then you'll see that. That's another reason why it's good to meet individually, because if they show up completely different when their partner's there, you know what the variable that's there that's in essence, causing them to not feel as comfortable.
Yeah.
All right. So risk is reviewing, which is essentially reflection, immersion, simplify, slow down. I think this is a different definition of it. But yeah, basically everything I said.
Okay.
This person called it one of the S's, stretch ourselves emotionally, but when you look at the definition, it's essentially bringing ourselves into it.
Okay. Great, thank you.
The biggest pitfall that I see people that are starting out is being afraid to ask them, the partners, once you notice the experience and they're there, they stay there, they spend a lot of time in the experiential realm. They see their the individual is feeling their feelings, they're congruent with it, but they don't ask them to turn to their partner and to share it. They just kind of stay there. And then they switch over because they're not comfortable. They switch over to the partner and they go, okay, and now what's it like for you? And they miss a big opportunity. And that's the thing I noticed the most, is not pulling the trigger, so to speak. Being afraid to ask when they're completely ready. The downside there is that if you do that for too many sessions, the impact, the effectiveness, the change won't happen, because them sharing it in front of you is great, but there's no integration. Integration comes from taking that risk. I'm not saying it's not a risk to share with you with their partner in the room, but once you do that enough times, they've already hit their plateau. They're too comfortable to be able to do that. And how is it going to translate outside the session with their partner that they live with? Sometimes most people live with their partners. How are they going to be able to do that at home when they have no experience of them doing that in the session? And the session is where they're supposed to be taking the biggest risk, because they have you there.
Yeah, that's great. So yeah, we want to strive to for them actually turning towards their partner, like assisting, right, helping them with that. That's like the goal.
And noticing if it's too much, how do we take one step back and have them take a smaller risk? And so checking in, what would that be like to do that? And if it's too much, find a way to slice it thinner. The risk, slice it thinner. Think of an onion, you can always slice it thinner. Even if at the end you've got 5 minutes left and they still can't do it, you can go, what is that like, to see how hard it is for your partner to turn to you and to share. That's still really helpful, because it gives them next, if it goes well, which it usually does, because the partner that is receiving it, it's not new, it's new for them to see their partner struggling this much, right? Normally the partner that struggles the most as the pursuer to share vulnerably, because they're so used to sharing in a very assertive way, but they're not used to dropping down and to soften. That's hard for them to do. So when the withdrawer sees their partner struggling so much to do it, it's a different experience for them. It's actually like, it's very inviting for them. It's actually quite reassuring. It builds in safety for them. So when you turn to the other side and you go, what's that like to see how hard this is? We spent the last 20 minutes just working on getting them to share this with you. What's that like to see how hard this is for them? And they can see how real it is. And then when they go, wow, this is, I never knew that it was this hard to really connect and really share this exact thing that I see them going through. I just want them to feel comfortable, right? Then you get them to share that. And then, you know, often the guard comes down, the fear comes down to do that. And if there's time, they can now share what they wanted to share. Or if there isn't time, next time now the fear is down to be able to do that. Maybe not completely, but to some degree.
Yeah.
And it still feels good to have their partner receive them and to see them for what they are, the thing that they're really scared to share, and that be a reinforcing experience for them. Maybe we can open it up to the rest of the group. Any questions from anyone else? I'm sure it'll be helpful for Kasia. If you imagine this was your first session coming up in 3 days.
I was just wondering if you've ever had like clients get heated
Yes.
in a session and how you would control that, since you are saying like we shouldn't have rules and expectations.
I wouldn't say don't have expectations necessarily. You have the model to fall back on. That is the expectations as far as a blueprint of what to do. So the question is how to control it. So I would definitely frame it very differently than that. Our job isn't to control behavior, because if they're showing how they act in a way that they would normally be at home, is that not what we want to see? It's not our job to play referee. It's our job to help them attend to what's going on for them, right? So I start with thanking them. So if I have to intervene because it's getting loud, I might write down some notes around what I noticed in that moment, but I always see it as a good thing because they're giving me a window into their lives at home. Instead of me asking them, you know, tell me about, you know, your fight of the week, or what would a video camera see, so that I could be in their home, I don't need that now. I have it right there in front of me. So I go, oh, perfect. Thank you so much. I might go, wow, let me stop you right there. Thank you so much for sharing and letting me see what I imagine is a typical argument that you would have at home. That automatically kind of disarms them, right? Because they're not expecting to be thanked for that, right? They're not proud of these behaviors, whatever it is, right? And then I just go right into EFT, which is to go or to what my notes were. So I noticed you doing this, and then you did this in response, which made you do more of that. Now who wants to start? Where do we want to plug into? Where's our entry point? That's what I'm always looking for, our entry point to be able to zoom into. And I don't need the story of the week because I got it right there. And even better is I have them triggered. I'm trying to get them triggered, and here they're already triggered. So that's why I'm thanking them.
So
and in a sense, you can,
it instead.
Yeah, you can think of that if you want as controlling it. I'm not controlling anything. What I'm doing is I'm basically allowing them to feel what's really underneath it. They're showing me their secondary, and I'm just converting that into primary.
Okay, thank you.
There's always primary underneath these secondary, indirect. Another way to frame it is, this is what they're comfortable showing, and I'm trying to get them to where what they're uncomfortable to show. So the comfortable covers the uncomfortable.
Okay.
If they were comfortable to be vulnerable, they would be. They're not. And so all it is an in essence, an assessment tool to go, okay, we're not at stage 2 yet. We're not done stage 1. We gotta keep going until they can do this for themselves. Maybe one last question before we close out here. By no means am I expecting anyone to be an EFT expert by the end of this. It's a lifelong journey.
One step forward.
Oh, I have one more question. So when you're using attachment theory, are you gathering kind of like their attachment style as they're describing like their current situation, or do you ever kind of go deep and explore kind of their childhood attachments as well?
That's exactly why what the purpose of that individual session is. So we've got 15 questions we go through. One of them is very much an attachment question, and then 3 or 4 of them are indirectly attachment questions, like the question of, so how do you relate to your partner when you fight? Like, walk me through a typical fight. That's an attachment question, right? Or the question of, growing up, did you have anyone when you were triggered that you can go to consistently? If not, what did you do instead? That's an attachment question.
So when you're just asking these questions in the individual session, do you already kind of get some like aha moments with the clients already, just from
for them?
that? Yeah, because you might
not
not
typically
have connected it.
Not typically, because that individual session, it moves pretty quick, and it really is like more of an information gathering session, and you know, a little bit to have them heard around what they feel is the issue in the relationship, and what the costs have been, and what the main issue, what their goals are. So we move quite quickly, so we don't leave too much time for that on purpose, because it's not really the intention of that individual session. 25 minutes is, you're not going to get very much as far as breakthroughs. Not because of the time, but because we don't explore it further. Like, that's not the goal. The goal is to get information that will help us to start working with them as a couple.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
The couple I'm seeing this Friday for the first time, they came and they were asking for, they didn't know anything about EFT, but they wanted a couples model that had to do with attachment. Both of them are actors. They're very, they've been exposed to attachment theory a lot, and they wanted a modality that incorporates attachment theory. And from my understanding, EFT for couples work's the only one that really fully incorporates it. All right, so we'll end it there. I'll send this out to everyone in the practicum group in case anyone else can benefit from it. And yeah, I'm really glad that so many of you did decide and were able to join today. And if we want to do more, we'll continue to do this. I usually do this at least with one person every couple of weeks or so. And that includes our registered therapist too. So if anyone does ask for some support, I'll open it up to the students as well. When it's a student asking, I don't invite the registered counselors, but when it's a registered, I always invite the students.
That's really great.
If they're comfortable with it, though.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks, everyone. And good luck on Thursday, Kasia, if you do end up having your first.
Yeah.
I'll leave you with this. Just because I don't always like that good luck thing, because, you know, if you're prepared, you don't need luck. But the thing I learned at some point, there's no such thing as bad EFT. Some EFT, even if it's like not really EFT, is better than no EFT. It's almost it's the whole do no harm, but it's like you're always doing good as long as you're coming from that frame. There's no hurting the client. And in fact, you're not just not hurting them, but because the intention's always to help them understand their cycle. And then the second goal as a byproduct of that, and also direct, is we're working on improving their bond. That's what it's all about. As long as that's where our heart and intention lies, you know, anything that's not that gets sort of framed as that's where we're trying to go to. And so any EFT is better than no EFT.
Yeah. That gives me hope
Perfect.
for my Thursday
Perfect.
session.
That's great.
Thank you,
Yeah, I'll let
Kasia.
you know if it does end up canceling or anything like that. But yeah, you can assume it's happening unless you hear from me.
One last thing, a quick one, because if it ends up happening, of any of us has another couples therapy booked, you said 80 minutes is preferred, and then we book it in Acuity as 80-minute session, they still pay just this one fee, right? Or
yeah, the extended fee is exactly 50% more, so it's 60
Yeah.
instead of 40.
Okay. Okay.
Oh, I think we've upped the rates for couples. We made it a little bit different. So I think it's you'll see it's whatever your appointment type says right now. So I've created a separate, yeah, once everyone lets me know, you're the only one right now from the group here that has couples and family appointment types. So the actual appointment type. So I think so normally it's 40, it's 50 for couples 50 minutes and 75 for the 80-minute.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. Okay, thank you so much.
Okay. All right, thanks everyone. Have a great rest of your week.
Thank
You
you.
too.